It's really good to be here this evening. We have a really special guest. You can probably hear my kids upstairs because they're still sort of talking to each other and getting themselves ready for candle lighting. Or at least I can hear them upstairs still. So we have this very special guest this evening, Sarah Aroeste. Did I do it? Did I do okay? Awesome.
Perfect.
In a way, I feel that this candle lighting this year is a little bit of a the former life of Rachel and Jeff, because a number of the folks that are coming on are people who we knew and or had a connection with in our former lives. I think that Sarah and I last saw each other 20 years ago, and Sarah met Jeff at Limud how many years ago?
In LA, had to be 10 years ago, more. Yeah, more than that.
So Sarah and I were in Israel 1 year together. Sarah, were you there 99 to 2000? Is that right?
98 to 99.
Okay, so you were there that my first year. You were there with Rachel Berenbaum,
Yep.
who came on Saturday night. Exactly. And we were all sort of studying and exploring the city and learning together. And you did some time at Pardes, right?
I did.
You like part-time at Pardes during that year? Is that right?
I was actually at the conservative yeshiva.
Oh, you're at the concert. Okay, I knew that we like overlapped. I was trying to figure out what the right. So I was at Pardes. You were at the conservative yeshiva, but the crowds socially overlapped. So we socially overlapped. We met each other. We got to know each other. Then I went back, went to rabbinical school, had kids, moved to Austin. And who's in Austin? But Sarah's sister, Rachel, and her family. And so my 5 years in Austin, I got to spend a lot of time with Sarah's wonderful sister, Rachel, and I got to hear about Sarah and follow her on Facebook. And then when we were putting together this program, Ellie Vallis said, I have someone who would be awesome. Sarah Aroeste. She's amazing. And she led this trip to Spain that I was on, and it was fabulous. And so she actually reached out and got Sarah to be here. So we have Ellie to thank for tonight. Sarah is a really beautifully accomplished musician. She is a Ladino musician, Sephardic music is her specialty, and she has 5 albums out. She's working on the 6th. She's won a number of different awards, both here in the United States and internationally, and that includes the Parents' Choice Award, right? Is that 2016? Is that right, Sarah?
Sounds about right.
And she's a classically trained musician. She went to Yale University and has been singing and performing since she was a child. She was just sharing with me that she really got her start singing and performing in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and that's where her family lives now as well. So I want to introduce Sarah, and she's going to take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. It is such a delight to be here with you. Sharing Hanukkah is one of my favorite things to do, and especially on top of that, sharing some of my Sephardic traditions, which might not be as familiar to you. So here you can see my menorah might not look exactly like yours. Mine is filled with oil because thousands of years ago in the temple, they lit their lamps with olive oil. So that is what we are doing today and what a lot of Sephardic families still do. So I want to explain about my menorah before I light it because I have this extra candle in my hand because you can see that the shamash, which is in the middle, is also in olive oil. Now imagine what would happen if I tipped this over. It would get really, really messy trying to use that shamash to light all the other candles. So in fact, we don't use the shamash to light our other candles. We use a helper candle to light all of the candles, and then we actually light the shamash with this last. Right? It's a little bit different than you probably do it, but it's so important we save it for last, not first. Okay, so the rest is going to be the same, and I see a lot of Hanukkah there, and we're going to light together, and then we're going to sing some beautiful songs in the language of my family, which I can't wait to share with you. It's called Ladino, and I know some of you might be familiar with it, but I know some of you probably aren't, and I can't wait to tell you a little bit more about it. It is the language of Sephardic Jews, Jews who came from Spain back in 1492. It's also known as Judeo-Spanish. Judeo-Espanol or Judaismo. But today I'm going to call it Ladino, and I'm going to share some beautiful songs with you. And we're also going to do these blessings in Ladino so you can hear a little bit of what it sounds like. So let's go ahead and light.
So can we do, let's have, if you're at home and you're lighting along with us, some folks are lighting along, some people are already lit. If you're lighting along with us, we'll invite you to light your shamash, since we have most of us have Ashkenazi setups here. So we'll invite you to light your shamash, and then to sing along with Sarah both the Hebrew and the Ladino blessings, and then we'll have the chance to light our Hanukkah afterwards together. Does that sound good, Sarah?
Sounds great.
Great. So we're kind of lighting our shamash here, and then.
Would you take this one?
Okay.
You're good? Okay.
I think we're ready. Yeah.
Okay, so first in Hebrew, the first blessing, and then I'll recite it in Ladino, and then we'll do the second blessing together. Here we go. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. And in Ladino, I would say, Bendito tu Adonai nuestro Dios, Rey del mundo, que nos santificó con sus encomendanzas y nos encomendó por encender candela de Hanukkah. And now the second one. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa nisim lavoteinu, bayamim hahem b'zman hazeh. And in Ladino, Bendito tú Adonai nuestro Dios, Rey del mundo, que hizo milagros a nuestros padres en los días los estos y en el tiempo el este. Now I'm going to light my helper candle. I'd love to see if anybody is also using an oil menorah. Please let me know in the chat. I especially like using oil candles on Shabbat. You'll notice that the wicks don't flicker quite as much. And the rabbis used to say that it makes for even greater shalom bayit for Shabbat if the wick stays extra calm. And now I light the shamash. I hope you can see how beautiful that is. Okay, so now I know some people like to sing Ma'otzor on Hanukkah. And my dear friend Ellie Vallis, who invited me, asked if I would sing a Ladino version. And here's the thing, guys. There really isn't a Ladino version because Ma'otzor is not traditionally sung by Sephardim. However, there is a version that you might not be familiar with that originates from Italy. It was composed by a Venetian composer named Benedetto Marcello, I believe, in the early 1700s. And it's a beautiful Venetian melody of Ma'otzor. And over the years, people, I think, assume because it's Italian that it might be Sephardic, but actually it is not. It is still Ashkenazi, but it is still beautiful, and I want to offer an alternative melody for you tonight. So I'm just going to sing one verse, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you've heard this before, I'd love to know. I'd love to see how these different melodies travel around the world. So please feel free to put it in the chat if you are familiar with this melody. It goes like this. Ma'otzur Yeshuati lechana el leshabeach tikon beit tefilati v'sham toda nizabeach li'etahim matbeach mitzara menabeach az egmor b'shir mizmor Hanukkah hamizbeach.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was really awesome.
So that's a lovely, lovely melody. I wish I could say it was Sephardic, but it's not. So a lot of people ask me, why do I specialize in Ladino? Why do I care so much about this tradition that very few people really even know about? So I wanted to share a few tidbits of light that I hope I can offer during this season. Rachel, is this the right time to do this?
Perfect.
Okay, great. I'm actually going to share my screen. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is teach everybody how to say Happy Hanukkah in this amazing language we're about to learn about, Ladino. So we're going to say Hanukkah Alegre. Let's practice. Hanukkah Alegre. Great job. I heard you all through the computer. Okay, so I already shared the bendiciones, the blessings. You can take a second to look at those if that interests you. You can see, if you speak Spanish, that a lot of the words look very similar, but they're spelled, some of them are spelled slightly differently. So what is this thing called Ladino? And how do I know it? Well, my journey started with this sweet, sweet little boy on the right with what looks sort of like a sombrero. This is my grandfather. This picture was taken in 1911 in what is now known as Macedonia. But back over 100 years ago, it was part of the Ottoman Empire. And Ladino was his first language. So how did Ladino get to Macedonia? So in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, exactly. And something else happened that was pretty major, the Spanish Inquisition. And in 1492, the Jews were asked to leave, and many went across the Mediterranean towards the Middle East, towards the Ottoman Empire. There were definitely migrations that did not go east, but the majority did. And you see, I put a little purple star so you could see where Macedonia is today. At the time, those countries didn't exist, but it was all part of the Ottoman Empire. And along the way, you can see there's a pretty large distance between Spain and Macedonia. So as Jews traveled, they took the Castilian Spanish they had been speaking in Spain and combined it with bits and pieces of languages from the countries they passed through or settled in along the way towards the Ottoman Empire. So I imagine everybody here knows exactly what Yiddish is, and I won't put you on the spot to ask if you already knew what Ladino was, because if you didn't, don't worry, you're not alone. But a lot of people think that Ladino is the Sephardic equivalent of Yiddish, meaning that it is a combination of its original language, in this case Spanish, and Hebrew. And in fact, that's not truly the case for Ladino. Ladino has so many other languages wrapped in. It also has Portuguese, Italian, French, Turkish, Greek, Hebrew, and Arabic. It is this beautiful, magnificent pan-Mediterranean language that up until World War II was the primary language spoken by Jews in the Mediterranean. And it is so devastating that very few people even know about it today, which is where I come in. So I do have one family member who was born in Macedonia and is still alive today, because my family came to the United States during the Balkan Wars. We don't really talk about the Balkan Wars so much anymore. But in 1912, 1913, when the Ottoman Empire fell, there was a great migration of Sephardic families from the Balkans to the United States and to Israel and to other places. But I did have family that actually stayed in Macedonia. And this is my dear cousin Rochelle. This picture was on her 100th birthday, and that was over 3 years ago. She is 103 years old, and she is a survivor of so much. She is a survivor of the Holocaust. She's a survivor of COVID, if you can believe it, and she is still just a miracle. She is truly a Hanukkah miracle. And Ladino was obviously her first language too, growing up in Macedonia. Her story is one that I carry with me all the time. This is her family. This arrow is Rochelle when she was 5 years old, and sadly everybody in this picture perished during World War II. She survived and was one of very few, literally 2 handfuls of survivors from her town of Monastir, which is now known as Bitola, because she hid in the trunk of a car and was shuttled to Albania, where she was saved by a Muslim family, and she was given a passport with a new identity and became Fatima Hussein, where she lived out the war in Albania under this new identity. And she survived. And when she returned back over the border to Macedonia, she learned of her family's fate and of her community's fate. I grew up with these stories of my grandfather and my incredible cousin Rochelle, and I harnessed all of that into music. You can see me here. I have spent the last 20 years touring the world, sharing these stories and the joy of this culture, which really is the best of so many parts of the Mediterranean. And I use these folk tales and personal stories that have been passed down to me, and I perform both traditional music and also I write my own. A few years ago, I was actually invited to perform in Macedonia. It was a dream come true. Truly, all my life, I'd always wanted to perform in the homeland, but what I discovered was unlike anything I could have imagined. I've performed all over the world, but never have I been treated so warmly and enthusiastically as I was in Macedonia. And the reason is because there are no Jews left in my grandfather's hometown and my cousin Rochelle's hometown. Not one single Jew is there today. And yet, knowing that I am the daughter, the granddaughter of people who came, of Jewish families who came from this city, I was given the red carpet was rolled out for me, and I have never been treated with such love and warmth and celebration because they just want their Jews back. It was so astounding. I came back to America and I wrote an article for Tablet magazine that got so much traction, and so many people said, wait, I've never heard of Macedonia. I want to check out why it's so special, that the next year I brought 20 people with me to experience what I did. And here we are in front of the oldest Jewish cemetery in the Balkans. It is in that same hometown. Again, today it's called Bitola, but when my grandfather and my cousin Rochelle lived there, it was called Monastir. I hope that I proved to all of these 20 tour participants how amazing the experience was. So much so that, again, I was invited back, this time to perform under the auspices of various governments, both the Macedonian government and the Israeli government. And you can see here alongside me is my Israeli counterpart. And that night, we had a celebration. After this big performance, we had a celebration on the rooftops of this town. And in this picture, you can see Jews, Christians, Muslims, Macedonians, Israelis, and me, all singing and dancing together. And I saw this picture afterwards, and I experienced the love of this experience. And I immediately turned to the two people with the arrows, who are Macedonian musicians, and I said, let's do something together. Let us join forces to create something really magnificent. And there was launched the Monastir Project, which is my 6th album, and it's what I'm working on now. And what it does is it brings together Macedonians and Israelis to compose and create and to play together songs that are unique to the Jewish experience before World War II. So it is all to bring joy and light, to preserve this community that doesn't exist anymore, but before World War II was one of the most flourishing, vibrant Sephardic communities in the Balkans. And in March, just 9 months ago, before COVID broke out, I went to Macedonia to launch the project and to start recording our Macedonian musicians. And before I perform, I always want to get into the mindset of my ancestors. And you can see in the picture on top is again my cousin Rochelle. This is when she's in her early 20s. This was before World War II. This was in the 1930s. She's walking down a cobblestone street in her city, and right below it, just 9 months ago on March 13th, I'm standing on that same exact street. And I got my inspiration, and I went ahead and I recorded those same two musicians that I'd seen the year before dancing on the rooftops. They've become dear friends, dear musicians. I recorded a kindergarten class in this city in the middle of Macedonia whose kindergarten is named after a Jewish partisan who died in World War II. Her name is Estrella Mara. And these beautiful kindergarten children, they sing as their school anthem a song dedicated to Estrella Mara. And just to see this generation of kids, so beautiful, so innocent, singing to this Jewish heroine is something, I can't wait for you all to hear it. It's really something. And then, of course, we had the Israeli side. And some of you might recognize this man if you know Israeli music. This is the great Yoram Gaon, who lends his beautiful voice on this project. And these are not singers on the project. These are another part of my creative output, I should say. The Monastir Project preserves what came before me, but what I am trying to do in the world to create more joy is to also not just preserve, but to push Sephardic culture forward. And I do that through children. So these are my two children modeling my mantra. Actually, this is my first mantra. I don't know if you can see my t-shirt. It says Ladino rocks. But the other one is here on my children, and it says Hora de despertar, which means time to wake up. I wrote an entire children's project. It has a music album, a storybook, an animated cartoon series, because I wanted to make this culture accessible and fun for families to learn about Ladino together. And on the album is a title track that says Hora de despertar, and it's all about the rituals we have waking up in the morning. But for adults, for you who are listening right now, it has a much larger meaning. Hora de despertar. It's time to wake up. There are so many parts of Jewish culture we don't even know about. And it's time to wake up and learn about these other parts about our tradition that make Judaism so special. So I am going to close up by singing with you because that is how I best express my joy. of this culture. And besides music, I also write children's books. If some of you have children or grandchildren who subscribe to PJ Library, if they're under the age of 18 months, they would have just received this book in the last few months. And it really is about paying it forward and showing new generations why they should want to wake up to this amazing, beautiful part of Jewish culture. So that being said, I need your help because so much of Sephardic music is interactive and it's singing together. So I want to teach you one of my favorite songs. You might be familiar with Ocho Candelicas, which has become the most recognizable Ladino Hanukkah song by the great Flori Jagoda. Now, some people think that that's a traditional Ladino song. It's actually not. It was written less than 40 years ago by Flori Jagoda, who is still very much alive today. But I wanted to teach a different one that you might not be as familiar with. Okay. So you can see the lyrics. If you are a little bit shy singing, there is a very prominent section in lie, 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 lie. So you can feel free just to jump in on the lie, lie, lie part, or you can sing all of it. It goes like this. I'll go line by line. We'll start on la, 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 so you can get the melody, and then we'll work on the Ladino together. So just first on la, 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 it goes like this. La, 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 la. That's easy enough. La, 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 la. Again, it repeats. A lot of Ladino music, because it was an oral tradition for so long, the music was really easy and repeatable, so people would remember it easily. So that line goes again like this. La, 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 and then it repeats. La, 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 la. And then here's the real lie, lie, lie part. La, 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 la. And then that repeats. La, 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 la. Now we're going to do a little loop-de-loop down. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. So we're going to do the whole verse on la or lie, whichever you prefer. And then we're going to dive right into the singing. And the singing says, Hanukkah, Hanukkah, 8 días de felicidad, 8 days of happiness. And then we're going to go to 8 days of singing, cantar, then 8 days of dancing, bailar, and then 8 days of enjoying, guzar. Here we go. First on la, la, la. La, 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 la. Amazing. Okay, now we're going to speed it up a little bit, and we're going to start with the first verse. Hanukkah, Hanukkah, 8 días de felicidad. Hanukkah, Hanukkah, 8 días de felicidad. La, 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 la. Of singing, we're going to speed it up. Hanukkah, Hanukkah, 8 días de cantar. If that was your first time singing in Ladino, you did it. You knocked it out of the park. Good job. That was great. So in closing, I want to do one more song because I have to share with you one of my favorite treats. I hope you can see this close enough. These are bimuelos. Bimuelos. So I do love latkes, I admit it, and I'm an applesauce fan. I'm not so into donuts, but what I do love are bimuelos, also known as bimuelos, bilmuelos, buñuelos. They come in all different shapes and sizes and spellings and names, but at its core, it is the most delicious Sephardic Hanukkah fried dough. And it is my treat to you. I hope you can smell these. And so I wanted to at least, if you can't eat them on your end, to at least sing a song about making bimuelos. So here.
Can I share something, Sarah? We have a Hanukkah magazine that our marketing director made for kids. Has all sorts of different things that people can bake and make, and stories and art. And the recipe for these are in the Hanukkah magazine.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, if you've actually tried them this Hanukkah, raise your hand.
I can't admit that we've tried them, but we still have 2 more days, right?
Okay, that's true. So now hopefully after this song, you'll be more inclined to because they're so fun. So in this song, this is a traditional song that came out of Turkey. And they're having a merenda, a party, a meal. So back in the day, in the old country, on the last day of Hanukkah, the community would come out and have a potluck, and everyone would bring different ingredients, and they would make bimuelos. So we're having a meal, a party. What time? I'll tell you. Oh, yes. One person pours the oil. Oh, yes. One takes the flour and measures it out in order to make the bimuelos. Now, I'm going to need help carrying a rhythm. Let's see. Okay. So you're going to come in with a Yar Aman part. And this is how it's going to go. Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. We'll do this a few times. Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. One more time. Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. Now you're just going to follow along. I'm going to sing the verses and we're going to come in on the Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. Hazaremos una merenda a qual hora volo dire Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. La una quita la zete de un teneke hasta 10 Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. La otra quita la harina de un saco hasta 10 Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. Para hacer los buñuelos en los días de Hanukkah Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. Again. Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. Now I'm going to say Yar Aman. Yar Aman, your turn. Yar Aman, my turn. Yar Aman, your turn. Yar Aman, together. Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. One more time. Yar Aman en Rumei Aman. Beautiful job, everybody. You have now sung 2 songs in Ladino for Hanukkah. If you didn't know any before, now you know 2. And you got to celebrate the incredible Bermuelo. I want to say muchas gracias for listening. If you want to find out more about the Monasteer Project or about my work or my children's work, there is some information. And now I'm going to stop my share and see if anybody has any questions.
The way we have been doing questions is we people can put them in the chat and then they go directly to Daniel, and then Daniel has been our awesome MC for getting the questions back out to our guest star.
Okay.
So Daniel, do you have questions this evening?
Well, I've got one so far, just the one, but it is a multi-part question. So while other people start populating the chat with their own, we'll just go ahead and see how many of these you can do in one sitting. So is Aroeste your mother's family's name? And is there any story behind it? What does it mean? That'll just be the first chunk of that question.
I'm so curious who asked that question. Yeah, so Aroeste is my mother's family name. There are several meanings of the name. So most Sephardic families, the surnames originated from a city, a town in the Iberian Peninsula. There are cities that that we have traced that relate to the name. My family is from northern Spain. We are not from Andalusia. We are from the north. There are other philosophies about the name. Some people think it means a oeste, so from the west. So as the Jews went east, they were looking back west towards Spain. I don't think that holds a lot of weight. I think our name really does originate from a very similar sounding city in northern Spain.
Very cool. That's awesome. Last chunk of that question is did you notice a change in how you were received as an ambassador of Ladino and Sephardic culture after you began using this name versus the very Ashkenazic name that you grew up with?
Again, I'm so curious who's asking these questions.
That question. Write in the chat who you are. Very interesting.
If he doesn't mind my sharing, it is Rick Brody.
Oh, okay.
There you
So
go.
Rick knew me from years ago before I was a singer. So nobody ever knew me with any other names in professional life. So yes, I did grow up with a different name. My father passed away when I was a child, and so I really grew up with the traditions of my mother's family. And so especially as someone exploring her Sephardic culture, it made sense to as I got older to take on that name as an ambassador for Ladino and Sephardic culture.
Nice. Only one other question so far. It's a nice one to follow up that last song that we sang. Is there a literal translation that you can share for the refrain on the last song?
I've seen a few. I mean, I've sort of said, oh yes, because the other ones I don't love. So aman 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 is used with frequency in Turkish music, and it can have some negative connotations, but it can also be sort of like an amen. It can be a positive one too. It can either mean oh dear, or it can mean yay. So I think in this song, it's the oh yay interpretation. I've also seen it as my love, oh yes, my love. But unless they're talking about their love of bimuelos, it didn't seem to make sense to have my love be the chorus there. So I like the oh yes.
I mean, some people might be particularly passionate about Buñuelos.
Well, actually,
to each their own. Yeah.
I actually wrote an entire holiday album, a bilingual Ladino English holiday album, and on this album, which goes through the different holidays in the Hebrew calendar, you can't see it, I'm sure, but my song for Hanukkah is called Bimuelo, and it is a love song to the Bimuelo. I love it that much.
Very nice. Cool. Couple more coming in. They're trickling in one by one. Do you feel comfortable performing in front of an audience?
Oh, I love it. Absolutely. I love all size audiences, young, old, big, small, because truly, uh, I hope some of you have the blessing to know this feeling, but I truly believe I'm here on this earth to do this work. This is what I'm meant to do, to share this culture. And so, however I can do it with any audience, that is how. That is how I thrive, and what gives me inspiration to wake up each morning, besides my kids and my family.
Well, that's
Beautiful.
That's beautiful. And I imagine that question might have come from somebody who wants to then come back to me and suggest that when we end this COVID nightmare, that we can all get back together and have you come for a live performance.
I would.
Great. Wonderful. Next question for you. This one comes through in Spanish. ¿Cómo haces los buñuelos?
Oh, there's a whole recipe. I could put it. I could probably put it quickly in the chat. It's so easy. This is a hack, if you must know. This is really just flour and water and a little bit of egg, but you can use aquafaba if you're dairy free. And some people use milk, but I use oat milk. And I've also used 1-to-1 gluten-free flour. So I'm an equal opportunity Bimuelo lover. And some people, real traditionalists from the old country, either use matzah or they use yeast. And some people even have, get this, there's an actual Bimuelo pan that you can use. I don't do any of that. I really do it the easiest, fastest way so that my kids can participate. It could not be easier. I mean, it really is pretty much fried.
If folks on this call want the recipe, you can just, I think we have our Hanukkah magazine that's on our website, and we can also send it out tomorrow.
And
Daniel just sent the link in there, in the email to the Hanukkah magazine as well. Daniel, is there another question?
Awesome.
Oh, but I should say, if you're gonna make the bimuelos, I actually like them plain. They're not sweet. There's no sugar in these. But what makes it fun are the toppings, and I highly recommend rose water syrup, which again is very, very easy to make. That's the traditional style. It's just a little bit of rose water. You can find that at the supermarket, and sugar, and you boil it on the stove, and that is the traditional topping. But certainly powdered sugar, cinnamon sugar, honey, maple syrup, they all do the trick.
That's amazing. That sounds delicious. Awesome. Next, and so far final question, but maybe hopefully some more will come in. Are you fluent in Ladino?
It's a great question. I read and write in it fluently. I conduct business in it every day. There are vast networks of Ladino speakers and enthusiasts around the world. And it's the only way that we communicate with one another. It is out of ideological reasons, we only communicate in Ladino. So the answer is a yes, but I always tell people that I sing it fluently. I write all of my own music in Ladino. Obviously what I did tonight was traditional for Hanukkah, but my last 3 albums have all been original music, and I'm proud to say I'm really one of the only, one of very few, not only, there are some, but very few contemporary composers today write our own music in the language. There are wonderful poets and writers, and there are people writing original work in Ladino, but not as many composers. So I sing it fluently, I read and write, but I don't have so many people to speak in person with on a daily basis. So like any language, not just Ladino, I'm really not great at speaking publicly off the cuff in Ladino or Hebrew or the myriad of other languages I know a little bit of. I much prefer to sing it or read and write it.
I have a question for you. So what did you think you were going to be doing when you were a kid? Like when you grew up? What was your
I always knew I was going to be a musician, always. I grew up very seriously training in Western classical music. And at the same time, I was always really proud of my Sephardic culture. So I always tell people my first Ladino performance was at my bat mitzvah when I demanded that I sing the Ladino version of Ein Keloheinu. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Do
We
you?
love that version, and we do it sometimes. It's
Oh,
great.
great. Okay, great. Non como nuestro Dio is a lovely version of that song, and I made sure that I sang that at my bat mitzvah, and but
You
from
went to
that point,
Princeton, is that right? Were
I
you
grew up, yes, in
was that the Jewish Center? Was that where you had your bat mitzvah?
the Princeton Jewish Center,
Yeah.
and I at the same time I was very serious about classical music, opera, in fact, and I think you mentioned I live in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and right nearby we have a wonderful music festival, Tanglewood Music Festival. I trained there as a young vocal artist, and I went to Yale and did a program at the Yale School of Music, and that all brought me to Israel to a summer program called the Israel Vocal Arts Institute, where I was studying very seriously opera, 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 opera. However, my opera coach in Tel Aviv happened to be the late, great, magnificent Nico Castel, who, besides being one of the world's leading experts in Ladino and was one of the first to publish a popular Ladino songbook. He was also one of the head diction coaches at the Metropolitan Opera. So I was studying with him, and as we got to know each other, we realized we had the same Sephardic background. And he started slipping in these Ladino songs in between our opera coachings. And I fell in love with the traditional music because I really didn't know it. I hadn't grown up with it. I grew up with a lot of food, Sephardic food customs that were passed down, and a sprinkling of songs, but I never really heard the breadth of Ladino music until that point. And so I came back to America, and I continued studying with him. And I put together a series of recitals, opera recitals. And in every recital, I put one little section of classical Ladino music. And without fail, after every performance, audience members would come up to me and tell me that the Ladino portion was their favorite part. And after a few years, I realized, you know what? I agreed with them. And I said goodbye to opera because my heart really was drawn to this Ladino repertoire, and I knew I wanted to dedicate my life to really studying it, and the rest is history.
I think that my final question is really, you touched on like really knowing that this is what you are meant to be doing in the world, and that is such a blessing to have that. I feel the same way about what I do. It's not a job; it's a life, right? Can you speak a little bit more to that? I mean, it's such a privilege and a blessing, and there may be some folks on here, whether they're kids or adults, who are still trying to figure out what they want to be and what they want to do in the world. What does it mean to sort of be able to have a career in which you are being yourself and you are putting, elevating what your soul is meant to be bringing into this universe?
I feel like it's not a choice. Something drove me in this direction that I can't even entirely articulate. I mean, of course, I had a choice to do it. In fact, my mother, I think, there's a story I love to tell that 20 years ago, when I left, it was one of my first jobs out of college. I was working for a Jewish arts nonprofit, and I got jealous of all of the wonderful klezmer musicians who were becoming quite popular about 20 years ago. And I ultimately left my job to start my own Ladino band. But I said to my mother, as a single mother, she wanted to make sure that I was taken care of. And I said, Mom, I want to start a Ladino rock band. And she looked at me and she thought I was absolutely bonkers. First of all, nobody was singing Ladino, and let alone a Ladino rock band. I mean, there was no way she was going to let me do that. But who's laughing now, right? 20 years later, I stuck with it because I knew not only was there something in my own soul that just compelled me forward, it was also this enormous, I hate to say the historic memory of Jewish guilt, but it's true, this consciousness that it weighs on me, these stories from my cousin Rochelle and from my grandfather, and knowing that my ancestral homeland was devastated because of hatred, and yet light still shines through my cousin Rochelle, through these songs that continue to survive, and through the fact that Ladino is still spoken today. There's something to that. I'm not alone in this endeavor, but I feel like if I don't do my part to sustain it and keep it alive, it could die out. I feel such an enormous responsibility that it is up to me and other like-minded peers to keep this flame glowing, because it's too precious and too beautiful and too full of joy to let extinguish.
Such a beautiful way for us to close. We're on the sixth night of Hanukkah and on the sixth day of creation, so we're told humanity was created. And so this is a day where we celebrate, if we connect creation to Hanukkah, we celebrate humanity and what it means to be people in this world. And one of the key things that we're given, I think, is the opportunity to create, to make, right? To be creative human beings, to create art, to create music, to be doctors, right? To make the world better. And we do that through our lights. And we have all these lights, they're in back of me now. But and the Hanukkah candles, what's so interesting about the Hanukkah candles is that they're different from the Shabbat candles. The Shabbat candles were actually created so that they would be used. You would put them on your table, and we didn't think back to the day there was no electricity. And so when the sun set, those candles were what you would eat your dinner by, right? They were used for light in your home. The Hanukkah candles is totally the opposite. You're not supposed to actually read by them. That's why in some ways we have the shamash lights, but actually the shamash on your the shamash on your Hanukkah doesn't light. And I was thinking at the beginning, but why is there a shamash then? But actually the reason is exactly the real underlying halachic reason for the shamash. Because let's say you don't have electricity in your house and you do need to use these candles to read by. You're using the shamash. You're not using the rest of the candles. The rest of the candles are just for spreading the light of the miracle and reminding us that we can all create miracles. We can all create hope. We can all create light in our lifetimes. The shamash is the one that we're allowed to use. So I think that that's probably why your Hanukkah has a shamash, even though you don't actually use that for lighting. But the notion that humanity was created and we were created to bring more light, and that's actually what these Hanukkot are here to remind us of each night of Hanukkah. We have this potential. And clearly, Sarah, you are bringing so much light to the world. I know that I learned a lot tonight. So I just want to thank Ellie again for making this connection when I shared at the board meeting that I had this plan to do this, Dancing with the Stars, Lighting with the Stars. And she was so excited to have you come. And, I feel like I have such a deeper appreciation for Ladino music and for the Ladino culture. And thank you for that. Thank you for offering that to us and for offering that to our community.
Thank you for having me and helping me share the light and the joy.
Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Happy
So
Hanukkah.
just a reminder that tomorrow night we have Morgan Simon, who is an economist. She works through money to help people understand how their investments have an impact in society. So she works for racial justice. She works for a fair economy. And most recently, she's been written up for bringing light to the reality that private prisons were benefiting financially from family separation. And she shared that publicly, and she was sued, and there's a whole article recently in Newsweek about her. She's a real social activist, so she'll be here tomorrow night. And then the following night is Garrett Reisman. It was pointed out to me today that I usually just say, and the final night we have an astronaut. Garrett Reisman is an astronaut. I haven't given his name prior when I've been speaking about him, I suppose. He's an astronaut. He's actually the first Jewish astronaut to be at the International Space Station. He apparently did learn Russian so that he could communicate with the Russians who were up there, and he spent Passover on the International Space Station. So we'll have much to talk to him about. That will be exciting as well. Thank you so much, Sarah. It was just really special to have you here, and this whole program has been wonderful. Thanks to everyone who has continued to come night after night. It's been really wonderful to share Hanukkah together. Have a good evening.
Hanukkah Alegre.
Bye, everybody.